Hi, everybody. Welcome to Rachel's Reviews. And today we're really excited. We have a special episode of Female Film Critics Panel. We're talking about the movies of the moment. We're talking about Barbenheimer. It's going to be very exciting.
Woo!
Yes.
Yes.
And so I'm Film Critic Rachel Wagner, and I had to have with me Molly Rasberry. Who's here to talk about these two movies.
I'm glad to be back, Rachel.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming. And we had some good discussions, and I just thought, you know what, this I think would be interesting to talk about these two movies, because on the surface, it's like nobody would ever put these two movies onto the same podcast. And so
Yes,
it's like really
I know.
that's the way the world has.
It just became this cultural phenomena, which was
Yes.
just started out as spite, I feel, for Warner Brothers wanting to put Barbie up to Oppenheimer because they were angry that Christopher Nolan took his business elsewhere. So
Yeah.
it's just Warner Brothers did this. They did this to themselves.
Yes. But they ended up helping each other
Yes,
in
they
the end.
did.
That's for sure. Because Oppenheimer would not have done as well, an R-rated
No.
3-hour historical epic
No.
without this kind of phenomenon.
Mhm.
So we had Barbie ended up with 162 million week in the weekend. And then Oppenheimer ended up with, let's see, where is it? 80.5.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So pretty impressive. Yeah.
Very impressive. I mean, it almost made up the money that was lost for The Flash right there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been an interesting summer. I don't know how you felt about, because there have been a lot of movies that I've been pretty meh on, but ones that I thought, oh, like the general public will like this, and then they've been kind of like, no, not really. And
No, Mission Impossible surprised me.
Yeah,
The reception for that. I was kind of surprised because the last one made bank at the box office, and I feel this one was pushed a lot. It's going to be a two-parter, but people were just like, nah.
I think it was a victim of timing a little bit. I think if it had come out even in like May over Memorial Day weekend or something like that, I think it would have been a lot different.
Maybe because more people were focused on Barbie and Oppenheimer, so I feel that was also a part of that.
Yeah.
That trend.
Yeah, I don't know, but I was surprised. I thought that there would be a better response to Indiana Jones. I thought there'd be, even though I was meh on them, I don't know, I just thought that, oh, this is kind of crowd pleasing. I thought The Flash certainly would do better than it did. I think everybody did.
I kind of figured that, oh no, this is not going to be good, because they kept pushing it so much.
Yeah.
They would have all these people saying like, it's the best superhero movie I ever saw.
Yeah, I didn't think it was going to be that, but I
no, and really trying to
bomb.
push it, and I was like, oh no, this is probably going to bomb. And you just no.
But I didn't have it in my top 10, so I guess I didn't we did our box office predictions, and because I was just going off of Black Adam.
Yeah.
And I figured, well, if Black Adam didn't do that well and it had a big name star, whereas there is no big name stars in The Flash.
No, and Ezra Miller, they have their own bottle of issues right there. Except for you could maybe say Michael Keaton, because they really tried to promote Michael Keaton as Batman during that time in that return, but it ended up just not really doing so great. Also, because it was just like also because it's mediocre.
In general, have not cared about bringing back the past. Like, I guess there's only so much that people want, sort of the nostalgia, you know, like, because I mean, they didn't care about bringing Indy back, they didn't care about bringing Ethan Hunt back, they didn't care about bringing the Michael Keaton back. Like,
I think it's also Marvel is kind of, and Star Wars have just really made it stale, because we already have been so inundated with it, with the sequel trilogy and the Marvel characters being just like Easter egg characters just right there. You're like, I'm just tired. I'm just bored of this now. You just get tired. And maybe it's a sign that, except for Across the Spider-Verse, maybe it is a sign that they need to pull back on the superhero cinema for just a bit.
Yeah. Well, let's see how it'd be interesting to see how this TMNT, if maybe we're in an animated superhero renaissance, how that does. It might not be able to, it might be far enough away from Barbenheimer to make its own thing, make its own impression. I mean, and
Yeah.
it needs to do way less. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't think it was a very expensive movie to make. So,
No, I don't think so either.
but I will be curious to see how that one does. I'm seeing it tomorrow. Fingers crossed. I hope it's good. But
Same.
yeah.
I got a screener, I got an invite to see it, and it was on a day I was working, a Saturday I'm working. I was
Oh,
like,
darn.
no. But I'm seeing theater camp this week, so I'm like, okay, at
Oh,
least I get to
fun.
see a new movie.
It's fun. I
Yes.
enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yes.
I saw it at Sundance. Are you a fan of Rachel's Reviews? Do you look forward to Family Movie Night, Female Film Critics panels, or the Talking Disney podcast? If so, please consider supporting the podcast by becoming a Patreon. As a patron, you get to access monthly events such as the watch-alongs and Q&As, where you get to talk to stars and find out the behind the scenes of the movie making industry. And you can pick what I review for Family Movie Night or even become a guest on the podcast. Podcasts and YouTube channels are expensive, and I really, really could use your help. I would so appreciate it. You also get to be a member of the Facebook group where we talk about all the films that we're seeing, and we have so much fun. Go to patreon.com/hallmarkies and select one of the Rachel's fan tiers. That's patreon.com/hallmarkies. We'll dive in to these films. I guess we should say, before we talk about Oppenheimer first. I was like debating which one to talk
Yes.
about first. But with Oppenheimer, I guess we should just say overall, I guess, what is your feeling about Christopher Nolan and what is your favorite Nolan film?
I think my overall Christopher Nolan feeling is that he's a guy who he is very much he has very intelligent ideas, but I think he dumbs it down too much.
Mm-hmm.
Because just like he's afraid that people are still not going to get it,
Uh-huh.
which to be fair is a good observation. But then you're just frustrated because you're like, you feel you could do a bit better. One thing this was just a random nitpick of mine for a lot of his films. The world is the rich people's world, and not just that, but so many, it's too clean. It does not look like a lived in world, except for things
Mm-hmm.
like Memento. It worked well for the strength of Inception because it's a dream sequence, but when I would be immersed in his cinema, I was just thinking, why is everything so clean? Nothing's
Mm-hmm.
dirty. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
it's very, very
Yeah.
sterile
Mm-hmm.
look to,
I can
very
see.
sterile feel.
Sometimes I feel like the things that he's overthinking, though, don't
Mhm.
really add anything and
Yeah,
just end up being
exactly.
frustrating, particularly with the sound mix problem, which
Mhm.
I actually didn't have with
Mhm.
Oppenheimer. I think it
Yeah.
was because I was watching 35 millimeter. I
Mhm.
wasn't because we have not only was it absolutely atrocious in Tenet, but
Yeah.
the IMAX is
Mhm.
always bad near me, like for
Oh,
any
geez.
movie. So then you take
Mhm.
a movie that's intentionally challenging
Mhm.
sound mix and it's unbearable.
Yeah.
Like Tenet was unbearable. Like
Mhm.
I hated
Oh,
that film just
geez.
about as much as any movie I've ever seen as far as a cinema experience. And I
Yeah.
just feel like what does that add except ostracizing the viewer from your story?
If
I
you're
just don't
if
see
you're
how that
talking
makes
about
your
a
movie better.
there is a director who does that on purpose. It's Gaspar Noé, and he does it because he purposely wants to discomfort the viewer. But I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure Christopher Nolan is thinking
I
like
think
that or
that's why
thinking
he
that's
wants to do it. I guess
Mhm.
I don't know. Like it's
Oh, that's true.
baffling to me.
And of course, his I believe he's a very centrist. I think he wants to
Mm-hmm.
be sort of he does have left-wing ideals, but it doesn't really isn't really communicated in his films. And so he tries to take a
Mm-hmm.
centrist version of it. It happens a lot with Batman,
Mm-hmm.
especially, where a lot of people, especially a lot of right-wingers, will latch on to that because if they don't see an outright
Mm-hmm.
denigration of their political beliefs, then they'll think that, oh, this person actually agrees with me, which is no, Christopher Nolan does not agree with you. I had a film professor went on a tirade about his films being fascist, and you could see, and with the Dark Knight trilogy, and you
Mm-hmm.
could see that there's like you just do Christopher Nolan fascism, and it's so many articles, people discussing and
Yeah.
dissecting the Dark Knight trilogy. So I had one of the critics who got angry about me with one of my critiques was Oppenheimer, got angry because I said if he's not really definite on this is a bad thing, like this is the conservative beliefs, this conservative belief is a bad thing, then a lot of the conservatives will think like, oh, he's actually thinking on the right side of that. And he said, what do you mean his right wing fans? He doesn't have any right wing fans. And I'm like, um,
He has lots of fans on all sides. I
yes,
mean,
he
and
does.
rightfully so. I think that he is a good filmmaker. I just don't
Mhm.
understand why he makes these choices that
Yeah.
seem to add, I just don't feel like they add anything substantive to the
Yeah.
film,
Hmm.
and just are frustrating. And I
Yeah.
was disappointed because when I saw Oppenheimer, I was like, okay, I felt
Mhm.
like I was able to hear everything. But
Mhm.
then, and so I was like, okay, maybe he learned and fixed
Mhm.
it. But then I'm hearing from so many people who saw it at regular digital screenings that they're not hearing like 30% or more
Yeah.
of the dialogue.
I did not have that much of an issue, and I was watching it on IMAX in
Hmm.
digital. So I'm kind of surprised with that,
Yeah.
that I had
And
that
not
and I
even
didn't.
just like normal
Yeah.
people, but
Yeah.
like Chris Stuckman said it in his review, like a bunch of
Hmm.
different critics have said it.
Yeah.
Cody Leach said it. So that's disappointing. But
Yeah. I think
but
maybe he focused more on the 70 millimeter release than he did with the digital, so that may be
yeah,
why, because he wants
maybe.
people to see the 70 millimeter. He wants people to see the IMAX
Yeah.
version. He wants to see, maybe that's
Mhm.
why.
The only place that I would have to drive to Arizona to see
Hmm.
the 70 millimeter, but we do have the
Yeah.
35 millimeter
Oh
here.
yeah. Hmm.
So what are you gonna do?
I know, it's just so far away. I need to ask one of my fellow film critics in North Carolina here because he's gone to see it, and because he was going to Washington DC anyway, and he got tickets to see it
Hmm.
with Barbie at the same time. So I need to see it the next time I see him. And that's like, how was the sound?
Yeah, I'm
Sound, because
curious. If
yeah,
people
I
are
am curious.
listening, what you thought of the sound, if you saw it on 70 millimeter, I'd be curious. But
Hmm.
nevertheless, I think my favorite Nolan film is Inception.
Hmm.
I I a part of it is because the experience of watching it was so much fun.
Hmm.
I had such a blast like talking about it with my
Yes.
friends,
Hmm.
family. What do you think happens? What do you think of there? What that
Hmm.
scene?
Hmm.
And I always felt like it had more heart than was given credit for,
Yeah,
because Marion Cotillard's character is, I always just felt for her so much, and the
I did
love
too.
between
Hmm.
Cobb and Mel, and
Hmm.
so the whole thing is like a big love story.
Mm, it
And
really is.
so yeah, and so I that one's still my favorite. I
Hmm.
get what people like saying that's not how dreams are and blah blah blah. I
No.
still just thought it was a super fun experience.
Mhm. It really is, and movies are dreams, so what does it matter if it was real, if the final scene was real or not? That's what I
Yeah.
ask people. It's like, you just watched a dream anyway,
Yeah.
so once the credit starts, you wake up.
Mhm.
That's the point of that.
Mhm.
But I think for me, it's a toss-up between what you said, Inception. I do really like Memento, but also I really like The Prestige, mostly
Mhm.
because he had to rely on a already established text to
Mhm.
adapt, which I think made the narrative more cohesive than when he comes up with the plot holes, like comes up with it himself.
Yeah.
So I think that works better, but I do really like Inception. And so
Mhm.
it's just fascinating with that. And I love the rivalry between the two men, between Hugh
Mhm.
Jackman and Christian Bale's character in The Prestige. It was great to watch.
Mhm.
And and the
Yeah.
twist was great too. So I really like
It's a
those.
good movie. For me, I really loved it the first time I saw it, and then I saw it a
Hmm.
second time. I was like, oh, it's not as fun because now I know.
No, the
Um,
twist. Yeah.
yeah, but it's still
Mhm.
it's a well-made film.
Yeah.
Uh well, let's talk about Oppenheimer. So Oppenheimer, it's his first biography film
Hmm.
that he's done, and it's based on the biography American Prometheus.
Hmm.
And it's about Robert Oppenheimer, theoretical physicist who was pivotal in developing the first nuclear weapons as part of the Manhattan Project.
Yep.
And they chose to do it in this nonlinear story
Hmm.
format,
Hmm.
with half of it being the story of Louis Strauss.
Yes. Hmm.
Yeah, Louis Strauss,
Hmm.
and he's getting confirmed to be the Secretary of Commerce.
Hmm.
and so there's that, and he gets kind of accused of bringing down Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
But then, so you
Mhm.
also see at the same time, you see the security clearance hearings
Mhm.
that are happening with Oppenheimer and different people
Mhm.
testifying at the same
Yes.
time that you're seeing the origin story of Los Alamos and the Manhattan
Mhm.
Project and
Yes.
him.
Mhm.
What did you think about that, the structure and how they kind of told the story?
I think it kept the momentum going. It
Mm-hmm.
was, of course, it's like with Citizen Kane, and then that, of course, got transfixed to Social Network, and 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 you have, and of course they have the backdrops being Senate hearings, confirmation hearings, board meetings, and it's just going, going, going. And the way you could
Yeah.
do that, because otherwise, if they did it in a linear structure and you're just watching all these meetings, you're like, I'm bored. This is 3 hours. So you're just, oh.
Yeah.
But this kept it going, even though I did get tired of the editing a few times. 'Cause it just with me, I'm just like with Chris, like, stop cutting the scene after 3 seconds. Let
Yeah.
it breathe. I'm one of those people
Yeah.
who is just like that. That's why Transformers movies give me a headache, because
Oh,
they just
yeah.
cut too much. And I was just like, oh, my
Bay in
head hurts.
general.
Yeah.
Even
So,
Ambulance, which was his best movie in a long time.
mm,
Whew, the editing is really
yeah.
rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I actually was not bored in this
Mm,
movie, even
mhm,
though it was long, and
mhm,
even though, I mean, I was interested in what was happening.
mhm.
And I think what you're saying is sort of the way. And normally, I'm not a big nonlinear person. Like, I hate Man of Steel the way that does it in that movie.
Oh, I hated it
Um,
in that one.
yeah, like normally I
Done
don't.
so bad.
Normally I don't enjoy that,
Mhm,
but I think you're right. I think you make a really astute point about how, because it is all of these meetings, that
mhm,
if they were able to kind of mix it up to different
mhm,
meetings,
mhm,
and so it kept it kind of interesting of what was
mhm.
happening.
Yes.
Yeah. I wish that we had gotten more into his brain a little bit more. Like, definitely, I
Yeah.
think almost universally agreed the most effective scene in the movie, aside from the Trinity test, which is
Mhm.
really incredible,
Yes.
is incredibly staged.
Yes.
But the scene at the rally,
Mhm.
I think, is almost universally agreed upon is like the most compelling scene, because I feel like
Mhm.
it's the one where we really get in his head the most
Mhm. I
of
agree.
that.
Mhm.
And you're seeing like these different sides of it,
Mhm.
and so I think that I wish I had gotten a few more of that, just like a few more moments
Yes. Mhm.
where I because even when he has these human interactions
Mhm.
with his wife,
Yes.
with
Kitty
um
with
with the other woman,
ah
I can't think of her name.
Jean.
um Jean,
Jean
yeah, Jean.
Tadlock, Florence Pugh's character.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's still pretty flat, he's still pretty
Mhm.
wooden, and I guess that's somewhat true to character,
Yeah,
but
I saw him
I
in interviews and he actually is pretty wooded, and I'm
yeah.
like, yeah, Killian got that.
But I just felt the movie, to me, was a clinical exercise
Mhm.
in like showing all this stuff and being interested,
Yes.
kind of like going to an interesting lecture,
Mhm.
like that I'm
Yes,
genuinely
it's a
interested in. Like, that's kind of how I
exactly.
felt, like very
Mhm.
impressive. I recommended the film,
Mhm.
but it did not move me.
Mhm.
It was kind of ironic that there was a Hallmark movie this weekend called Take Me Back for Christmas, about
Oh,
this
yes.
woman who gets in this alternate dimension where
Mhm.
it's kind of like It's a Wonderful Life kind of
Mhm.
a thing, and she sees what if she'd taken more risks in her life and what
Mhm.
things would be like. And in
Mhm.
this alternate dimension, her mother is there, and her mother has not died. And when
Oh,
she
wow.
sees her mother, she just starts
Mhm.
bawling, and I start bawling. And I thought it
Oh.
was outstanding. Yeah, that it was a
Mhm.
really good Hallmark movie. I really enjoyed it.
Mhm.
And that movie caused me way more like emotion, and I was so much more moved
Yes.
by this little Hallmark movie than I was the comic book
Yes.
movie.
I
So go
I
figure.
actually
That's
agree.
me.
I was actually kind of closer to tears for Barbie than I
Yeah,
ever was with
me too.
Oppenheimer. I'm sure there are people gonna be angry about that, but I'm just no, it's just it is that. It is kind of emotionally vacant
Yeah.
at point because it's such a male-dominated movie, I think was a part of
Yeah.
that. And also where the women are they act the hell out of the small roles they're given, but they're so woefully underrepresented. The only ones who allow themselves to feel like Jean Tatlock, where she's talked where there's depression,
Mhm.
and his wife Kitty, played by Emily Blunt, who goes into alcohol addiction
Yeah.
because of having to be home and not having love and care that's from her husbands or anything like
Yeah.
that. And it's just like I still I
I
was
mean,
still just like, they're the ones who are actually letting themselves
yeah.
feel something, and everybody else is trying to keep this solemn vacancy, I guess you could say. And I think that was a part of that, and it just permeated through the film.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big criticism that I had, that
Mhm.
the female characters I thought were really weak. And you could say, well, they're
Mhm.
based on real people, but
Yeah.
that was an interesting conversation we had. That,
Yes.
I mean, especially Jean, I just thought,
Mhm.
like, the women in this movie exist solely as motivation
Mhm.
for Oppenheimer.
Yes.
And I was just like, what? No way. And then, we had this conversation
Mhm.
about that,
Yes.
that evidently it was not only because he broke up with her, basically,
Mhm.
that she committed suicide, because she was being hounded by the FBI because she was a
Exactly.
communist.
Exactly. And also because I didn't bring up she was a psychologist and she was from the psychoanalytical school of thought, the Freudian
Hmm.
one, and she was grappling with her sexuality because she was bisexual.
Yeah.
And and in Freudian terminology, if you're queer, you are malformed, you're not
Mm,
part of that. That was the Freudian idea, and
mm,
Freud actually pushed a lot of gay
that's interesting.
conversion therapy stuff
I didn't
like
know
that
that.
because
That's interesting.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that's come from that, and it's that idea psychoanalytical, oh, you were abused by someone as a child or that sort of thing that made you like this when she had a happy childhood. So that conflicted with her ideas. So with
Yeah.
that conflicted with that, and that would cause a lot of trauma right there, having to tell.
Sure.
And that was during a time when homosexuality was a mental illness. It was considered a mental illness
Yeah.
by the DSM.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, I said a big miss for me in the film was the female characters, especially Florence
Mhm.
Pugh's Jean Tatlock, who I've
Mhm.
learned since watching was not portrayed accurately, but even Emily Blunt's character, Kitty Oppenheimer, exists only to provide motivation for Oppenheimer. It literally is
Mhm.
implied if he doesn't value and love them, they have no reason to live. I also felt the nudity was unnecessary, and frankly, given the time and context, made the female characters look silly.
I thought until Florence Pugh puts the Bhagavad Gita on her chest
Hmm.
that it was fine.
Hmm.
But what I saw, one of the critics who got pushback for this, Divaka, she works for
Hmm.
Criterion,
Hmm.
and she actually made a joke about that because she's Hindu and that was the
Right.
way she could, and that's one of their texts. It's kind of like putting the Bible on your chest, like read this passage right here. And I don't think a lot of people saw it that way,
It,
especially Western audiences.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
didn't. Yeah,
Yeah.
it didn't feel authentic to me. Like, I'm
Yeah.
fine with, a certain degree of nudity if it feels
Mhm.
authentic to the characters, like something like Portrait
Yeah.
of a Lady on Fire, like totally feels
Mhm.
authentic to those characters. But like in this one, I just did not buy that these stuffy scientists were just lounging around. Like, like I just don't believe that
Yes.
they would do that. So to me, it made them look silly, and it felt
I
fetishizing to me.
I like this comment somebody on Twitter put, he directed a sex scene like he never has had sex in his
Yeah.
life, and he finds it so unappealing. And I was like, yeah, that's about right. And maybe that was the purpose of the film. Maybe so, because yeah, he's cheating on his wife with this
Hmm.
girlfriend from before, which
Yeah.
was very true to Oppenheimer's character. He was a womanizer,
Hmm.
but and I'm always that person who's just like, I don't care if you add nudity, that's fine to me because we're human bodies. We
Yeah.
all have this, but
I don't
even
know.
but I could
I
be at a
just
time where I'm
felt,
like, I'm tired of this.
like it didn't feel authentic to the characters. That was my problem. So to me,
Yeah,
it just felt silly.
I can
But
see that.
yeah. But we also have so they try to kind of explain his motivation, which I thought
Mhm.
was interesting, because as he's Jewish and he wants
Yes.
to prevent the Nazis, he meets
Yes.
Heisenberg, and he wants to prevent Heisenberg and the team in Germany from getting there first.
Yes.
So that's his motivation, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But then he gets a lot of pushback once the conflict in Europe is over and they're still continuing on forward.
Yes.
Yeah, which I thought was pretty well done. I thought that whole dynamic
Yeah.
back and forth. There were a lot of characters, and they could have maybe combined some characters, even if that's not like a lot of biographies do that. They'll like take 3 or 4 real life characters and combine them into one character for the movie. And I think that they could have maybe benefited from that.
Maybe part of that. I feel like his two close friends, just Hartnett's character and then Rabbi Izdor, they're just too dissimilar for that. That would not have worked for me. And those seem to be those two, like, because the Josh
Because they
Hartnett's
say
character said, "You can't be part of this union. It's a communist front." And then you have his other friend who is more laid back and
because, like, for instance, at the one point they say, "Oh, so and so British scientist was a spy the whole time." I don't even remember who that person was. Like, they were maybe in the movie for 3 seconds. Like,
not Kenneth Branagh and his accent.
Yeah.
Same boy.
And like, people like that could have been combined, I feel like. I don't know. But but that was, I thought, pretty well done. And the whole thing with Albert Einstein, and that, so Strauss thinks that Oppenheimer turned Einstein against him.
Yeah, because
And that's
he's that petty.
But part of the reason why he's kind of out to get him. And it turns out he didn't say anything about Strauss. No. He said they were talking about the chain reaction that will destroy the world.
Yeah.
Which was a very clever way to kind of end things, because like, it destroy the world.
Well, it technically transformed it. You could say it did destroy the world. Because of that, we are now always in the ever-present threat of nuclear war. And this was during the time, because Christopher Nolan would definitely remember we're living in the 70s and the 80s when Cold War tensions were very tight and heightened. And there were so many things, like there were lots of British programs, like this movie called Threads that was shown everywhere about nuclear fallout and the chain reactions that happened with it. Threads. It's a British film that scarred a generation, it's even called. Yes. Yeah, it's from 1984, or it was a very popular British one. And it was just, that threat was everywhere, even in their pop songs. Like one of my favorite Kate Bush songs, Breathing, is about an infant succumbing to a nuclear holocaust right there. And it's just like, this was a single in the 80s. Like, this was ever present in people's mind back then, that I feel a lot of people like me in the 90s, we didn't really get that, because once the Berlin Wall fell, they were just like, "Oh, nuclear threat is over. It's done for. We don't have to really," well, not always, but it's just like, we don't have to be as scared of that anymore, because we're sort of tentative allies with Russia. But it's still ever present. I mean, most of the world's powers have nuclear warheads, nuclear missiles right there.
I think that the way that it changed the world, even if we haven't had a nuclear tax, like, I think now we all know that people would go there. Like, that's possible.
Yeah, and it is possible to destroy the world.
And the most chilling scene of the whole movie, aside from, again, the Trinities, but as far as like more subtly chilling, is when they're talking with Truman, and the one guy says, "Don't pick Kyoto. That's where I went on my honeymoon."
Yes, because it was the banality of evil, basically, right there. And that was true. That secretary did take it off the list, because he said, "It's a beautiful place, and that's where I went on my honeymoon." But it still doesn't raise the question, why Hiroshima? Because Hiroshima was not a military base. It was mostly civilians, because they knew they were going to bomb mostly women and children. And that's what's scarring.
Yeah. And if people want to see a really good movie that's underrated about the Japanese perspective.
Mhm.
There's a really lovely anime film called In This Corner of the World,
Mhm.
that is all about, it's about this woman who ends up being a young arranged marriage bride to a man in Hiroshima,
Mhm.
and it's really good. Um, but yeah, it's true. I mean, they didn't go into that, and then they also, and no movie
Mhm.
can tell every story. I
No.
I don't personally have a problem with them not showing the impact in Hiroshima and the Japanese side. Some people have said
Mhm.
that. I'm okay. I feel like it was abundantly obvious, the power and the destruction, and
Mhm.
so I was okay with them making this more of an American story, I guess, for lack of a better word. Um,
If they
but
showed the whole impact, it would probably be NC-17 as well, and they would have
yeah,
not had the budget because it wasn't just your body's disintegrating, it was your eyeballs
yeah,
melting, skin melting off your face, and then after that, just horrific poisoning, radiation
hmm,
poisoning that would kill you and
yeah.
made
And they
people
did have a
suffer.
few like flashes of people's,
Mhm.
skin and things like that. I do think it would have been nice. I've done some research, and since it was mainly an American story, that they made it seem like there was nobody living in Los Alamos. It was completely barren, and nobody
Yeah.
was impacted by
It's
the
like,
the
"No, that's not
downwinds,
true."
which is not true at
Mhm.
all. There's some really good resources out
Mhm.
there about the people that were living in Los Alamos and
Yes.
what happened to
Mhm.
them and how they were treated. Some of
Mhm.
them were employed by the project, how they were, their health was affected, how they weren't even
Mhm.
told that this was
Yeah.
happening in the Trinity.
Mhm.
It's pretty gross, and I think there could have been, in such a long movie, there could have been time for one
Yeah.
scene where there was something about
I
that.
do agree with that. I think if you bring that up, there's gonna just be backlash because, well, especially men is what I'm getting backlash for when I
Mhm,
said I think it should have been more sympathetic to the plight of the Japanese because
mhm,
a lot of people be like, "Oh, the Japanese did horrible things," that sort of thing. It's like, so we do something even worse to them, and especially civilians who had nothing to do with the war effort. That's just something that, and there are still people, I still, whenever Oppenheimer comes up, I'm gonna see a tweet, someone saying, "Japan deserved it," or "They had it coming." People still think this, and that's what I was worried about, that
mhm.
people were still gonna think that after this movie, and a lot of people still do.
I mean, it is true that the Japanese generals were incredibly hard-headed. Like,
Mhm.
it was gonna take a lot for, I think the war would have gone on for a lot longer. I think that is
Mhm.
true.
Yeah,
But,
but
I mean,
yeah.
I'm certainly glad I'm not anybody that has to make these hard
No.
decisions. I'll say that. But I think it is pretty tough
Mhm.
to, especially when it's something that affected so many civilians. It's pretty
And
tough.
still being affected today, there are still
Yeah, that's
some
true.
people who they still have the scars they got as children with radiation burns, and they're
It's
still
true.
always in care because of all that. So it's still being affected. They had nothing to do with the war. So
Mhm.
it's traumatizing, and it's terrifying to think about that. And the only reason why the Japanese don't really hate us is because we didn't invade them. Well, we didn't really make them become American. We didn't make Japan an American colony like they
Mhm.
thought we were going to, and so they were thankful for that. And
Yeah. The Marshall
but it
Plan was definitely
Mhm.
better
Mhm.
than the what had happened after. I think we did at least learn after World War One what
Mhm.
had happened with Germany and them getting
Mhm.
radicalized. I think we did a better job,
Yeah, we
uh,
did. I
at
think so too.
least
Yeah.
with with that. But
There was
but
still some issues, but much better than
much
what
better.
could
Yeah.
have could have been done.
Yeah.
But yeah, but if you bring that up, one thing I also brought up is that if someone is discomforted by the concept of this film, especially if their family was impacted by this, please don't go after them.
Yeah.
Just know they're hurt. They're upset that their grandmother died of leukemia from it, or all these other issues, or this
Yeah.
film is just say
Well,
that
even
my
if
family was.
you're not like personally connected, it's like like you should be kind of upset about
Yeah.
nuclear war. Like it's like a thing.
I
I
have a
mean, come
very
on.
close friend who read the synopsis of The Matrix, and the concept of it terrified and discomforted her so much she just doesn't want to watch the film,
Uh-huh.
and that's fine.
Yeah.
No, I'm never going to come and be like, you need to watch The Matrix. It's a masterpiece. Because no, if that
Hmm.
discomforts her, then she shouldn't
Yeah.
have to. And yeah, and a lot of them are going with it saying, I'm boycotting this film, and I think you should too, which I'm not sure I agree with, but they're allowed to have their opinion instead of being yelled at or seen as
Yeah.
awful people for having that. Or one of my other fellow film critics who brought up that I felt that the fact that we didn't see any Japanese people, it felt like the victims were being erased right there, which you can actually argue that, but a bunch of people then just came after her, and she's Japanese and she felt this way because of her family being directly impacted by this. So
Yeah.
I'm just
I
this
mean, it's
film,
a
I
like
yeah,
I was okay with it being an American story, but I can totally understand having an opposite view. Like that's
yes.
valid.
Mhm.
Um, I gave it a 7 out of 10.
Mhm.
And so, not like a rave review, but I
Yeah.
like it. I'm glad I saw it. It was well
Same.
made.
Same.
And so we'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/hallmarkies. Well,
let's switch gears.
Something a little
Over to
cheerfuler.
Barbie. Oh my gosh, that's so weird. Yeah, totally switching gears over to Barbie.
Yes. The other
And
existential crisis film of the summer.
yes. And so I guess we should start out too, maybe with a little bit of your history. Would you consider yourself a Barbie fan?
I was
Or do you stand on
actually
Barbies?
not. I
Mhm.
was a very tomboyish. I hated dolls when I was a kid. My mom would try to buy us Barbie dolls and try to play with
Mhm.
her. She had 1962 model
Yeah.
that with the 1962 dream house. If you saw my Twitter feed, like I actually built it up, and
Mhm.
I was not a fan. I thought, "Oh, it's making me even as a kid, I was like, I don't want to be this girly girl. It's making me conform to this idealized version of womanhood I don't want to be." Without really realizing, wait, with Barbie, you can be anything. And I didn't really get that
Yeah.
until later on. So as I told mom, it's just like, I wanted you to play with my mom asked me, I wanted you to play with this so much. I'm like, I just had to grow up a little bit, mom. Like just
Mhm.
like a few weeks ago, I said that I just had to grow up a bit. And now I'm a
Mhm.
Barbie girl.
Yeah. Well, when I was little, I played with Barbies some. We had some Barbies, but
Mhm.
I preferred the American Girl dolls
Mhm.
over the
Oh
Barbies
yeah.
because they were a lot easier to dress.
Mhm.
That's the downside to Barbies. They're actually kind of hard to like get the
Oh,
clothes on and the hair
to
and
get
the
the pants on, especially if it's
yeah.
denim jeans, it's so hard.
Yeah. But I always loved things that I thought were pretty and fun. And I was always very like bummed out when
Mhm.
I felt told by the world that that was lame or stupid
Yes.
or,
Mhm. Yeah.
and so I think that's why as a YouTuber, that's one thing I've tried. I mean, obviously I cover Hallmark movies. Hello.
Mhm.
I cover
Yes.
things. But as a YouTuber, I definitely I've covered over 30 of the Barbie movies. I've
Mm.
tried to cover I covered the Tinkerbell movies, covered that
Mhm.
because I think it's good to have even I'm sure there's many others, but I think it's good to have at least one actual film critic who says, I'm going to take
Mhm.
this seriously and actually like watch these and review them
I know.
and
Oh, yeah.
make sure that there's something worthwhile that's being put out
Mhm.
there, and
Mhm.
and for the most
Yeah.
part, I mean, especially if you consider them in context, that
Mhm.
these animated Barbie movies are, made for DVD
Mhm.
movies with no budgets, hardly at all.
Mhm.
They are a billion times better than they have any right to be. If people actually, they really
Yes.
are. I mean, they have lore and
Yes.
stories, and the animation usually is pretty terrible. But
Oh, yeah.
they actually, if you just look at it, the stories, the voice acting is usually pretty solid. They usually get
Mhm.
like orchestras to do the music, and there's decent
Mhm.
songs and music, and
Nice.
there's ones that are better than others. But I'm always kind of taken aback that, like, I
Yeah.
just watched this week the Barbie video game Hero one is
Mm.
that's going to review this. I'll have a review on it this weekend. There's 3 different animation styles. I'm like, they didn't
Wow.
even do that in Wreck-It Ralph.
Wow.
They didn't even go to 3 different worlds in Wreck-It Ralph.
Like, they didn't even work that hard for this one.
Yeah. It's pretty clever. There's like a whole section that's kind of Minecraft-esque
Mhm.
aesthetic as far as the animation, and then there's another section that's kind of like Candy Crush kind of,
Oh,
and
that's
then
really
CG.
cool.
Yeah, it's pretty good and like pretty clever. Um it's like the Barbie take on Tron.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
and my favorite thing about this whole movement of Barbie is that I am happy to see people embracing traditional femininity as being
Mhm.
strong, because so long, even if a movie was supposedly about empowered women, there was only
Yes.
one type of empowered woman. You only saw women who were, kick butt action heroes. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's not the only way to be strong. You can be
And even
strong and be a little shy and a little quiet. And like, you don't
and
have to.
even classic Hollywood kinda had this too, where
Yeah.
Katharine Hepburn is kind of this idealized version of the strong woman, and she
Hmm.
wears pants in a lot of her films, and she
Right.
has this very tomboyish-esque way of standing, which of course came from her background of growing up a tomboy. So, and you didn't really see that. And even then, like you saw this with stuff like Barbara Stanwyck or Betty Davis, where they are very, they don't really have much of femininity. Well, not as much femininity. They still had very strongness, but it was also that idea. It's just like, oh, you have to stand up for yourself in a way. And and also Carol Lombard too, which I believe that Greta Gerwig said she took a lot of inspiration from Carol
Mhm.
Lombard in 20th Century
Yeah.
for Margot Robbie and Barbie. Mhm.
And for a long time, if a lot of women of my generation, if like their daughters would say, "Oh, I love pink," they would
Mhm.
they would cringe a little bit, which would make me cringe. And I suppose, if because the problem that happened for a long time is
Mhm.
that it was a gender identifier.
Yes.
That so something like if you were going to get Legos for girls, they were
Mhm.
pink or purple,
Yeah.
and or whatever. And you can see, if you want a really good laugh, if you go onto Amazon and you look up Bic pens for her,
Oh, yes.
Bic
I
pens,
see this.
and the reviews, and people like, I was I was into dudes, and now I'm using this
Yes,
pen, or
now I feel free.
yeah. It's pretty funny. But
Yes.
so I think that was where the cringe came from, of
Yes.
like, you like it because you're told that it's a girl. But
Mhm.
also, then we kind of demonized
Mhm.
things that were traditionally feminine, traditionally girly, traditional,
Yes.
whatever
Mhm.
label you want to think.
Mhm.
And that was the main message that I took away from this movie. I do think the
Mhm.
movie is a little bit messy. I think it has a lot of
Yeah.
ideas. It's not perfect. But
No.
I
Mm.
think overall, the main message was labels are stupid, and
Yes.
you need to actually listen to people, whether it be Ken or
Mhm.
Barbie.
Yes.
So, what did you overall think of the movie?
I really liked it. I liked it more than Oppenheimer. I felt more
Hmm.
the feels a little
Yeah.
bit with that. But also, I can understand why people had issues with it. One of the critics, Siddhartha Akta, I can't Siddhartha, he wrote a good review about how it's a lot more of the white feminism aspects of it. And I do agree with that, but
Hmm.
that's because a lot of feminism we take from Western thought came from white female intellectuals who didn't really think of the idea of race also being affected by patriarchy and how
Hmm.
patriarchy and white supremacy goes actually is tied together
Hmm.
in the sphere of the manosphere of the
Hmm.
so and I can see that, but I also think it's a film that it's very feminism 101, but that's not a bad thing.
Hmm.
It's
But I
actually
also
yeah.
felt like it was slightly criticizing
Mm,
Feminism 101. What
I think
I
of part
said
of
in
that
my
too.
review, I felt like it was criticizing lazy feminism and lazy
Yes.
activism that doesn't
Yes.
try to actually listen. I
Mhm.
wrote in my review, I said that Sasha calls Barbie a fascist despite not
Mhm.
knowing her at all or understanding
Yes.
anything about her. Such labels and easy answers are not helpful,
No.
even if they sell more Barbies or make soundbite pundits feel better about how they
Mhm.
manipulate the world with
Yes.
their supposed insight.
Yeah, and I think that's also an attack on being overly politically correct, but not really understanding the terminologies of this
Hmm.
because there are real fascists in this world,
Sure.
and she doesn't really get that. And I like that she did bring up that idea. You set feminism back 50 years, you did this, you did that, you did that. You're making us feel bad about our weight issues, that sort of thing, because those were real comments a lot of critics of Barbie had. I even had that issue when I was little. I was like, "Why
Hmm.
is she so thin? I could never be that way." So so I can see that, but this film, it just from the opening scene does bring up why a lot of conservatives really don't like Barbie. It's because Barbie is not defined by motherhood. And they're in the first shot scene from the teaser that's right in the first shot. They're
Right.
destroying the baby dolls because they're like, I don't have to be a mom. I don't have to be the domestic one. I
Hmm.
can be whatever I want. And it was just and that's what Barbie did. That's what Barbie was the first doll that came out. That's oh, it's not a baby doll, so you don't have to be a mother girl. You can just be a woman. You can have this
Hmm.
boyfriend who's an accessory.
Right.
You can
That's
have your
true.
dream house. You can have a pool. You can have your own car.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, and plus, like when you're playing with the baby doll, which can be fun,
Yeah.
I have nothing against for 99% of things that bring people joy,
Yeah.
that aren't hurting anyone else, like
Yes, yes,
then
agree.
it's fine. But like they can be fun for kids to play home and play,
Mhm.
mom and all that. That's fine.
Yes. Mhm.
But the you can do so. Like babies, what
Mhm.
do? They eat and sleep. Like that's all they
Yep.
do. So you can't do anything with a baby
No.
doll. They're
That's
no
why they
fun.
had That's why they had stuff like the baby tumble surprise, where you just flip the baby over. You're like, I hope you're not doing this for the real baby. I hope you're not doing this to your baby brother or sister. Like, baby tumble surprise.
The thing though that I would say about, I mean, in general, all the winks, the nods were really fun. Things like
Yes.
Alan Barbie, things like that was
Hmm.
really good. Um, but I do think that in the real world, there would be way more weird Barbies.
Hmm.
Almost
Yeah.
everybody who played with Barbies at a certain point, you were mixing up all the clothes, you were cutting her hair,
Yes.
I don't
Yes.
know anybody that didn't do that. And so
Mhm.
I think there would be like lots of weird Barbies
Yes, there are. There probably should have been more weird Barbies in that
for
universe,
sure.
but yeah. Also, I really like that you brought up with that hatred of things of femininity because the film does bring that up, which is like with Sasha saying men hate women, women hate women, everybody just hates women, the world just hates women, women, mom. And Barbie's like, "Is that true? True." And
Well, because
Gloria's just like, "It's complicated."
Barbie starts out in this utopian
Mhm.
society where she thinks that all of the women's problems have been solved because
Yes.
we're telling you to be a doctor, to be an astronaut, to be a whatever
Mhm.
kind of a
Yes.
thing.
Mhm.
And which is really interesting because again, you think that a lot of people think, oh, well, we've had empowered female roles
Mhm.
for all these
Yeah.
things, but
Mhm.
we've still only said that one type of empowerment is okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so that's
That's
why it
it.
all feels really hollow to the American Ferrera
Mhm.
character.
It really does a little
Hmm.
bit, yeah. But I do like that America Ferrera was not a white woman in this role. I think that really helped with it, where she is, because she's
Yeah.
from, the actress is from Honduras, is from Honduras ancestry,
Hmm.
which I think actually works better than if it was a white woman. So
Yeah.
I do like that that was specifically written into the script, that that role was written specifically for her. But it does really get that with the monologue, but she's also such a great actress at times. You're just like, I know this is corny,
Hmm.
and but yeah, it actually kind of does work. It did
Yeah,
work for some people.
she says in the monologue, it is literally impossible to be a woman. You are so
Mhm.
beautiful and so smart, and it kills me that you don't think you're good enough. I'm just so
Mhm.
tired of watching myself, every single other woman tie herself into knots so that people will like us. And if all
Mhm.
of that is also true for Doll, just representing a woman, then I don't even know.
Welcome to the Pilot Podcast. My name is BJ.
And my name is Me Too, and we promise this promo is worth it, so please don't skip ahead.
We're two judgy friends who put our judgmental skills to work for you. We review the pilot episodes of new and popular shows and shows that our listeners request to answer your question, should I watch this?
Look, a lot of us are spending a lot more time at home, and yes, we should be reading and trying new projects and enriching ourselves, but does anything beat binging a great show?
Let us take the guesswork out of deciding what your next show will be. Tune in to The Pilot Podcast at thepilotpodcast.com.
That reminded me of
Yeah.
the first line reminded me of, I don't know what it is to be a woman. It reminded me of the first opening line of Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex, where
Hmm.
woman is not born a woman. Woman is constantly in the process of becoming a woman. And that's what that reminded me of, because and she goes into the text about historical changes of womanhood and how that definition has changed, of women constantly trying to fit that mold. It's a great
Hmm.
read if you like existential philosophy and feminist philosophy. And when I saw it like that, I'm like, oh, she's basically just paraphrasing a lot of what Simone de Beauvoir was talking about, just really dumbed down for us viewers, the audience, and for her daughter. So, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and I felt like, because some people said that, oh, they just talking about the patriarchy way too much, but I felt like there was and people when it lost their minds because I said that
Mhm.
there was something subtle she was saying, because they're like, it's not a
Yeah.
subtle movie at all. I'm like, what I mean by that is I think that what she was there was a subversive point that she
Yes.
was making,
Mhm.
that I think that what she was saying is that because there was humanity to Ken in the end, he wasn't just this
Yes.
like evil person
No, he's not.
who he was
This evil
somebody
incel or anything like that, because
he
he's
was
basically an
somebody
incel.
he was someone given no direction for his
Mhm.
life, nothing that
No.
mattered. So he
Mhm.
reads about this patriarchy, this structure, this
Mhm.
radicalization, right?
Mhm.
And he embraces it, obviously incorrectly. Like that's
Yes, yes,
obviously wrong. And
yes,
but then he realizes that,
yes,
and they have a conversation. And I think that what she was trying to say is that when we just sort of lazily invoke labels like, oh, that's patriarchy, oh,
yeah.
that's
Mhm.
fascism, that's what
Mhm.
it doesn't add anything, it doesn't help anything. If
No,
anything, it just increases radicalism.
exactly.
Is what we have to do, like Barbie does at the end of the movie. She sits
Mhm.
down with Ken and she talks to him and she says, I hear you and I hear what you
Yes,
want.
yes,
And and then he sings a whole song about it. That's why it was so funny when people were like,
yes,
it's an anti-man movie. I'm like,
yeah,
he
it's like,
literally
no.
sings a whole song about
And it's showing with him with it, because it's basically his narrative kind of resembles a lot of incel ones, where
Mhm.
the guy who is involuntarily celibate, who thinks that, oh, she won't notice me, she wasn't see me, and then they go to places like Reddit forums who bring up that, oh no, it's not your fault, it's the women's fault, it's feminism's fault,
Yeah.
and this is how we're actually going to help you with this, and then they get indoctrinated into something, into radicalism.
Yeah, I felt
And
like it was
that's,
saying a
yeah.
lot about indoctrination on
Mhm.
every level, and how
Mhm.
we could, if we just actually talk to people
Mhm.
and listen. And you even saw it with the founder character, that she sits
Yes.
down and she talks to Barbie and she actually listens to her.
Yes. Yes, Ruth.
Mhm.
Yes, and I do like that they do mention in the film just like, oh, Ruth Handler, her ghost has her own office on the 7th floor. They never bring it
Yeah.
up why. I just like that because she's been dead since 2002. So it's just
Oh,
like,
okay. Yeah,
yeah.
I felt like Mattel deserves a little bit of credit here.
Yeah.
I do think that they were willing to put the history of their company
Hmm.
and their own organization under a bit of a microscope. Obviously not
Agree.
perfect, obviously not,
No.
but I think it was pretty good.
Hmm.
And I think that they did give Greta a pretty long leash, which is impressive. I
It
think.
makes
I think they
I
deserve
was
some
happy
credit.
with that too. I do
Yeah.
that too. I agree too, and willing to have them be laughed at that no women are on the board or nor women as a CEO. I was kind of surprised that I kind of thought Mattel was going to be the villain. It's the evil corporation. It's just no, when he sees that even the the dojo
Hmm.
casa houses are selling, he says, "No, we can't have that." It's like, "But it's making us money, sir." It's like, "No, I did not get in this business to reach for the bottom line. I did it to make all little girls happy and not be
Yeah.
creepy about it."
And they really think that having a Barbie doctor and Barbie astronaut
Yes.
is solving all the problems.
Yeah.
But
It's just
Greta's here to say, nope, that's
no,
not,
no, that's not
that's not.
just because you have representation does not work. And also bringing up how the Kens are kind of mistreated as well because
Yep.
they don't have any say in the government.
Yeah.
They
They don't
don't
have
even
anything to
know.
do.
Yeah, and even they asked him, "Where do the Kens live?" It's like, I have no idea. Like she never even thought about where do the
Hmm.
Kens go? Kens don't have a boys' night. They don't have that. And of course, I'm pretty sure there are a bunch of people, a bunch of conservatives who are like anti-men. She should have just dated Ken and none of this would have happened. It's like, yeah, but she's forfeiting her own feelings for a man, and that's not the message here.
Well, and
No
I
woman
think,
should have to do that.
yeah, and I think she's also saying that we should never get our self-worth
Mhm.
from other people valuing us or
Exactly.
other people or corporation, for goodness sakes. And that both Ken and Barbie learned
Mhm.
that they were important on their own.
Yes. Hmm.
And that I said that I didn't know if they could pull it off.
Hmm.
But then I said that let's see here, where is it? That I said, it's all BS and we know it is, but it's easier
Hmm.
to dismiss someone by invoking patriarchy or calling them a fascist than to
Yes.
actually deal with their complicated humanity as individuals.
Hmm.
It needs to stop. And who would have thought a movie about a plastic doll would provide this important call to action? Actually, I
Hmm.
did because I've long believed in the power of Barbie. I'm just
Yes.
glad that Greta did too.
I am very much as well. And I'm glad it was an equal writing partnership with Noah Baumbach as
Yeah.
well. It's
You
not
could
just her.
feel that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting. Somebody brought up the other day. I wasn't a huge fan of White Noise, his last movie, but it is kind of interesting when you think about it
Yeah.
that it was basically Barbenheimer in one movie. It
I
had the
know.
nuclear what
The
things and
the nuclear cloud and
yeah.
tried to leave out, but with the good satire about the
Yeah.
80s. Yes.
I was thinking it was 12. And I thought it
Yes.
was really funny.
That's
Uh
probably why I liked White Noise more than other people did,
yeah,
apparently. A lot of other people I saw like, "I don't like this." And I'm
like that
like,
must have been
I was on its wavelength.
a lot of interesting dinner conversations going on in the Gerwig Bombach household.
Oh, there must be, there must be, as with the nannies just helping to
Yeah,
take care of their sons with them.
right.
Because she just had another son
Oh,
in
did she?
February. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that must have been fun. She was like, I think she was also pregnant making this movie. Like she was pregnant with Little Women, and she didn't tell the
Oh,
cast members,
really?
so they only knew after the party. It's like, oh, and also I'm pregnant. I've been pregnant this whole time.
I think that the weakness of the movie is probably it has a lot of ideas. It's a little
Hmm.
messy. I
Yeah.
think that not all the humor works. and sort of balancing, like wanting to be a big allegory, tell a big story, and also be really funny and be really approachable.
Yeah.
I think that's where sometimes it's just like, it's not perfect, but
No.
it was one that I'm anxious to see again. It kept me thinking about it. I've had really interesting conversations with everybody that I know who's seen it. And even people I knew that really hated it. I've had interesting conversations about it.
Yeah. I was also really glad the humor did not give us seconds pause. Like I see in a lot of superhero films where they say a joke and then they have to pause to make sure everybody got it. So they laughed. So then
that's
the
true.
laughter can stop right before someone else talks. Like they didn't really have to think or care about that. They just kept going. I already missed some jokes because people were laughing so hard because they just kept going. And it reminded me a lot of His Girl Friday, which Greta Gerwig brought up with the dialogue and how fast paced it was. And I really appreciate that. Yeah. And I can see why people would be like, oh, why do you compare these classic movies to what you're doing? And it's just, if her bringing up these classic movies that influenced her in her filmmaking gets others to watch classic cinema, that I have no complaints. If it gets another person to discover His Girl Friday, 20th Century, and Singing in the Rain, of course, I am all for that. Please, please, I am totally fine with that.
Yeah, you know, one I thought of that I have no idea if influenced her at all, but I thought of Defending Your Life.
Oh yeah,
of it. I don't know if you ever seen that with but it's one of those movies that has a lot to say. It's this allegory kind of too, that that it's about this afterlife, and you get whatever life that you've lived,
Albert Brooks.
It depends on the hotel that you get. So like Meryl Streep saved this child from a burning building. So she has this like super luxe hotel, and Albert Brooks is like in this like 70s dinky, because he was like a music agent or something like that. And it's so funny. Like the food and and they have to defend their life. And if they can't defend it in court, then they have to go back and try again.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then they go to the movie theater and they can see like a movie of their past lives of all the tries that they've had before. It's a fun movie. It's fun. But
I need to watch it. It's on the Criterion channel, I believe. Criterion released it. So it's Albert Brooks. Albert Brooks is fantastic.
So I really did enjoy it. I gave it an 8 out of 10.
I think that's about where I am too.
Yeah. Well, let us know, if y'all are listening, what you think of both of these movies. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section or on Twitter. And Molly, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at raspberryraz at twitter.com, or whatever an X is now. And I'm also on Blue Sky with at mollyrasberry.bluesky.social. If you actually got up there, if somebody has you a code. I'm also on WordPress at mollywoodwrites@wordpress.com, and sometimes you can find my writing on the film stage.
I gotta sign up for Blue Sky. There's too many.
I think you have to get an invite. I had an invite from one of my close friends sent me an invite code. I was like, yes, because otherwise they're just like, you're on the wait list now for the beta. And I was like, oh, it doesn't do GIFs or videos yet, unfortunately. Yeah, it's got to work for that.
Well, and don't, y'all, if you're watching, don't make me turn off the comments. Let's keep it civil for both these movies. It's just,
please.
Yeah, let's be respectful. I would love to hear your thoughts. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. Check that out. Also, make sure, if you are listening to the podcast on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews on there. I really appreciate it. And if you are watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Appreciate that so much. Also check out Hallmarkies podcast. Lots of good stuff going on over there. And we have the Patreon group and merch store. And check that all out. And we'll talk to y'all later. Bye.